That's how you tell climate stories. That's how you communicate, by finding the way to meet people with an environmental solution or a climate solution based on the things that people actually care about, so they get excited about it. I don't need people to care about climate change for the same reasons or climate change solutions for the same reasons that I care about them. I just need them to adopt them and make them part of their lives so we actually can solve climate change. So that's what I learned back in 2006. It was such a light bulb for me. It was like, oh, right, don't lecture people, don't tell them what to do.
Welcome to Sustainability Transformation Podcast, where we explore bold ideas to drive positive change for people, the community, and business. And in today's discussion, we are so blessed to have Josh Dorfman, CEO and host of Supercool, a media company spotlighting climate solutions that actually work. Josh is also the co-founder of Planted, a carbon negative building material startup and creator of the Lazy Environmentalist, a media platform turned TV and radio series. And the key goal of our discussion is to explore how to cut through the noise and the fluff, accelerate sustainability, which is with scalable business models, honest storytelling, and innovation that truly moves the needle. Josh, thank you for joining, for giving us your time. You've built sustainable ventures inside Amazon, carbon negative startups, and even hosted climate shows on various platforms. But let's rewind. What's your original spark moment for stepping into the sustainability space?
Yeah, thank you, Enoch, for having me on your show. My original moment, I guess you could say, goes back to 1997, a parking lot in the city of Guangzhou in southern China. I had gone to China after college, thinking about a career perhaps in the State Department, Foreign Service, maybe CIA. I just thought, if I go to China, cool stuff is going to happen. And so I was over there teaching English on a university. I got a part-time job working in a bicycle lock factory for an American company. And at the time, 1 billion people were riding bicycles in China. There were very few cars. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to be retired by the time I'm 30 years old. Look at this huge opportunity. Well, we opened a third factory in southern China. And I was traveling with the owner to this restaurant. We were going to consummate the deal, drink some crazy, what they call Baijio, put a little snake blood in it, kind of nuts, but that's how you do business. But before we went into the restaurant, this guy says to me, look, Josh, my car, my Mercedes, is the biggest Mercedes in the parking lot, bigger than all the other Mercedes. And I thought, wow, I don't know a lot about climate change, but I know enough to know that if there's actually 1 billion more cars here, if everyone switches from bikes to cars, because I could see all the bridges and tunnels and highways being built so rapidly, I thought, I don't know where this is all going, but I should probably do some research and find out. And so that was the moment that triggered it all for me.
Nice. That's a very international experience and exposure. So, what did you learn about the public perceptions of sustainability during the lazy environmentalist era?
Well, that was a very interesting moment, because that took place now about 10 years later. So I come back to the States. I end up not selling bicycle locks to 1 billion people riding bikes. Turns out that's actually much harder than, than I thought it was going to be. So I came back to the US. I went to get an MBA, but I could never lose feeling like I've seen the future in China. I have to do something about it. It just took a long time for me to figure out what that would be. One of the first things that it became was this thing, the Lazy Environmentalist, which was a radio show, national radio show on Sirius XM, a reality TV show on what was then Sundance Channel. And the cultural moment was really interesting in 2005, 2006. Al Gore's movie Inconvenient Truth came out in 2006. Suddenly the media, the culture was shifting. People wanted to understand and tell stories about the environment really for the first time in a more mainstream way. George Bush, while he was president, I actually just learned this over the last few days, had given a speech in 2005 saying America's addicted to oil. We've got to get off oil. This is causing problems, which I only just found out. So it was a time when America actually was like, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to get smart on the environment. And there's a lot of interest, I would say, a lot of cool storytelling done. If I'm being honest, back then, I'm not sure it really amounted to all that much actual change, real change in the economy or in people's lives. But I think it was a moment of raising awareness that here's a problem, and maybe there are ways to solve it that work for us in a first century context that fit our lives today. We can do things as businesses, as governments, as consumers and individuals to cut our carbon footprint in ways that don't necessarily require us to sacrifice, but actually might even elevate our quality of life. And maybe the trade-offs aren't as big as we've been led to believe they are. That was the initial awareness, I would say, that perhaps that kind of future is possible.
That's good. Around the sustainability storytelling, again, from the podcast, as I've started, clearly I've had to learn how to be able to tell stories around sustainability. I'm curious to know what is one or two things you learned about the effective way of storytelling, which doesn't alienate the people who need to be brought on board. I'm curious to know what are some of one or two that stuck out with you about the most effective way, the process of actually, is it different from the storytelling?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. So I'll give you an example from the Lazy Environmentalist radio show, and maybe we can talk about Supercool, and I'll give you a modern day example that's actually surprisingly kind of similar. In 2006, when I had this radio show, I wanted to do a show about eco-friendly cars. I didn't just want to talk about the only eco-friendly car that was available back then, which was the Toyota Prius. We did talk about that, of course, but then I was like, I want to get something kind of more interesting. I want to tell an interesting story. So I found this drag car racer named Plasma Boy, John Wayland, who had taken a tiny little 1972 Datsun, like a tiny, tiny little car, had taken all of these batteries out of a forklift in a warehouse and essentially shoved them in the trunk of this car and like in the back seat. And then he took it to the drag car racetrack, right? And he started beating all of these muscle cars. This was out in Portland, Oregon. And I think he definitely set the quarter-mile record for an electric car, but he was just beating everybody. And so I somehow found a story about this guy and I brought him on my show. And so SiriusXM, it's a live radio network, right? We had this little environmental radio show. And in the US, people are mostly listening to it in their cars, or probably their 18-wheeler big trucks going down the highway, right? So we bring on this guy, Plasma Boy, and he comes on the show. He's like, Josh, you wouldn't believe it. The other night at the track, I blew the doors off of this Corvette. 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds, 800 pounds of torque. It was incredible. I blew past this guy. And then I went up to him at the end of the race and I said, how do you feel about the fact that I just kicked your butt with a car running on American-made energy? So this is like America and speed and power. All of a sudden, our tiny little radio show that I don't know how many people actually listen to, the lights of the phone lights start blowing up. All these people start calling in. Everybody wants to talk to this guy. Hey man, how'd you do that? I want to get that for my pickup truck. That's amazing. They're just going back and forth talking to this guy. Everyone's calling in. And what I realized in that moment was that nobody on the phone calling into my little environmental radio show, The Lazy Environmentalist, was an environmentalist. None of them, right? If you asked any of them, I would bet they say, what? No, I'm not an environmentalist. That's for communists. That's for like, right? That's not for me. But they were all excited about the electric car, the same solution that all the climate warriors are excited about. That's how you tell climate stories. That's how you communicate, by finding the way to meet people with an environmental solution or a climate solution based on the things that people actually care about, so they get excited about it. I don't need people to care about climate change for the same reasons or climate change solutions for the same reasons that I care about them. I just need them to adopt them and make them part of their lives so we actually can solve climate change. So that's what I learned back in 2006. It was such a light bulb for me. It was like, oh, right, don't lecture people. Don't tell them what to do. The job of people who are telling stories about sustainability is to show how the thing that you want people to understand makes their lives better in some way, beyond just saving the planet, beyond just reducing carbon. And if you can do that, you can have an incredible conversation. And just to kind of bring this forward to today, I recently had a different guest on my current show, which is called Supercool, which is more of a business focus around climate solutions. And this guy is the team principal for Formula E racing for Andretti Global. So, you have F1, obviously, one of the most popular sports in the world, Formula One racing. We bring on the guy. So Formula E is F1 race cars, but they've got electric batteries. They got electric motors and batteries in them. What's so interesting about Formula E racing is that it's the fastest growing motorsport in the world. They've gone from 0 to 500 million global racing fans in a little over 10 years. That is unbelievable speed and growth. And when you ask this guy, Roger Griffiths, who was there from the beginning, how'd you do it? Well, he tells you a bunch of things, but really what it comes down to is they said, look, we had an underpowered car. We had a weakness with batteries. We couldn't run a long race because the battery wouldn't last. So we had to shrink the race, 45 minutes. Okay, well, as social media and all of the stuff that we consume today has shortened our attention spans, turns out 45 minutes is a really good amount of time for a race. That's about all the time people want to pay attention. Now, also, we have electric cars. These are quiet. Let's put the races right in the middle of the city. Let's not ask anyone to travel very far to come to the race. And in fact, people can walk or bike or Uber or take public transit to the race. It's really convenient. And electric cars, since they're quiet, families will probably show up. So let's create a more fun-filled, kind of festive atmosphere that's also good for children. And they do, and then so they're doing all these things to make the whole experience more welcoming. And then they innovate on the track, doing whatever they can to make the race exciting, borrowing from like Super Mario Brothers with attack mode, or like you ran over three little parts of a track, three little arrows on the track, and suddenly your car gets an extra boost and it's going faster than the other cars and everyone gets an opportunity, right? And so what Roger said to me, this is the last thing I'll say. He said, look, if you go to Monaco for the F1 race, it is the most glamorous, the most spectacle of sporting events probably on the planet. But once the first car is in the lead, if it's a good driver, you're probably not going to see a lead change, and you're going to see very few passes just by the nature of F1. With Formula E, when that race goes to Monaco, same track, you're going to see 400 passes. You're going to see frenetic racing. You're going to see something so much more entertaining. Now, the point is, all of this is the platform for Formula E is electric cars. It is a climate solution, right? Must be the future of transportation, but they don't have to go market electric cars for everyone to know that this is about the future and about sustainability. They've built a far superior entertainment product that has enabled us to be the fastest growing motorsport in the world. And so if I'm looking at that and I run a business or I run a nonprofit, right, or I work for the government and I'm trying to think like, wow, I have a climate initiative. I'd like people to get interested in my climate initiative. What lessons might I draw from that to tell a better story, to attract more people to my climate cause?
How did your transition from sustainability storytelling, the transition towards the startup building begin?
Well, I've always from the beginning kind of interwoven between them. In fact, I got to the Lazy Environmentalist because I had started a modern design, sustainable furniture company about a year before the Lazy Environmentalist. And the way the Lazy Environmentalist came about was that my first employee, on her last day working for me for my sustainable furniture company, took that opportunity, since I was no longer her boss. This is what she said to me. She's like, look, Josh, you are no longer my boss, so I get to tell you exactly how I feel about you. You're selling all this eco-friendly furniture and stuff, but you're the worst environmentalist I've ever met. You're always in the shower. You barely recycle. I was moving from Washington, D.C. up to Brooklyn for this company. And she's like, you were about to throw your bed out. I took it to the homeless shelter. She's like, you're a giant hypocrite. And I pretty much hate you. Like, I've worked with you very closely for about a year and a half. And I just don't understand because you're a hypocrite. So I just felt that I was going to be very open and authentic and transparent because she was right. So I wrote a blog and I called myself the Lazy Environmentalist and said, look, I take long showers. I do my best thinking in the shower. I need a really good low flow shower head to cut down on that energy and water because I'm not getting out. I'm not proud of it. That's just the reality. And I listed all these other examples. I care. I'm lazy. I need this to be really convenient. I'm a lazy environmentalist. And I think millions of people probably feel like I do. We'll do it if it fits our life. So, furniture company to media. Media lasted for about 5 years with Lazy Environmentalist. Then I went back into startups. Ultimately, it got to this startup that I launched about 4 years ago with two incredible guys who were engineers at SpaceX building rocket ships. In fact, one of them was in charge of the life support systems that kept astronauts alive on the Dragon crew spacecraft. So this company is called Planted, and what we do is we grow this really fast growing grass, kind of like bamboo. It's not exactly bamboo. It's actually thinner, so you can mechanically harvest it, which you can't do with bamboo. We grow this grass because we're trying to remove carbon from the atmosphere faster than you can with trees. The grass grows like 10 times faster than trees. Now, to grow this grass, we had to stand up a tissue culture lab and then greenhouses and then get enough plants to commercial scale farmers so they can grow this grass for us. We grow the grass, but then we cut it down and we turn it into materials for home building that replace wood, lumber, trees. And we create these panels. So here in the States called oriented strand board, it's the structural panel that you nail to the wood beams, to the 2x4s to effectively build a house. In this case, we're pulling carbon from the atmosphere with this grass. We've built a factory that has no smokestack on the roof. It's entirely electric. So you'd be interested in this, right? With given your background. So it's first of its kind technology, right? We basically took a giant mill and we shrunk it down to something that can go inside any warehouse. You plug it in. 140 feet later, you effectively get a 4 foot by 8 foot sheet that you can go build a house with. And we just got the largest home builder in America, a company called D.R. Horton, to give us an order for 10 million of these panels, which is a pretty big deal for a 4-year-old startup. I guess I'll say that much. It's about 90,000, or it's about 90,000 homes, 10 to 15% of the US home market in any given year for just a 4-year-old company. So I was the founding CEO of that company. I ran it for the first 3 years. And then I stepped back and one of the guys from SpaceX stepped in as CEO, and I've been an advisor to the company as I've now gone on to some other things. I just love the idea. I love the creativity behind business, the creativity behind storytelling. I mean, I love kind of moving between these two worlds because it's all about invention, and that's what excites me.
How did you manage about the land area, which is enough to meet as the business is growing? So I know it's only 4 years, but what about in 10 years' time? I'm curious to know, perhaps, without sharing any secrets, of course, of the business, but, curious to know how you worked out with the scale. And the reason for asking that is in agricultural sector about food and other plant oils, perhaps those systems can learn from your experience at Planted.
Yeah. So we spent a lot of time researching in the early phases as we were researching different potential biomasses. We looked at industrial hemp. We did look at bamboo. We looked at this perennial grass and other forms of biomass as well. We looked at used corn stalks, used sugarcane stalks. Now, they don't have the structural integrity for us to be able to use those types of feedstock to make what's ultimately something you're going to go build a house with. It just doesn't add up. But we looked at everything. For the perennial grass that we use, the way that we think about it is a mill today that makes an equivalent product out of wood needs about 150,000 acres. What I don't know exactly what in hectares, maybe it was at 60,000 hectares or something of land. We need 1/10 of that. And that's for the same amount of output because we're not waiting 20 to 30 years for that tree to grow. We're we're harvesting every year and potentially more than once a year. So what we're able to do is get to equivalent output of something that requires massive amounts of land in a far smaller footprint. And since it's agriculture and we are actually the ones standing up the supply chain, we can design it in a way where we can grow closer to where we can see where markets are going to be growing for housing. And so we can shrink the distance that feedstock has to travel, which is a lot of cost and a lot of carbon. We can locate our factories closer to those fields as well. There's a lot we can do to be very efficient in our supply chain. So we're using land efficiently and we're also optimizing all of our operations. And in my mind, this is why the more efficient you are as a company, the lower your carbon footprint should be as well. And we map all of this, of course, because the whole point of the company is to remove carbon from the atmosphere and keep it out of the atmosphere.
Yeah, that's impressive. If you look at the last 10 years, you have the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which is 10 years now. You have the Paris Agreement, which is 10 years now. But if you look at a report from the UN about the UN SDGs, is far behind the expected goals, not even around 50% for about 17 of those goals. So I am sharing all of this to show that there has been less action. There is a lot of awareness, which personally I believe is a shame. So I'm curious to know, what do you think is the right mindset shift to move from climate awareness to climate execution?
Yeah, I think about that a lot. On, while everything you're saying, it's not even whether I agree with or not, it's just reality. But there is another reality. And the other reality is in 2024, $2 trillion was invested globally in clean energy, wind, solar, EVs, battery storage, nuclear, you name it. It's going to be more globally in 2025. It's projected to be 2.2 trillion. Fossil fuels has never even come close to that number. I mean, it sort of stays relatively level. It's hovering around $1 trillion of investment, which obviously is too much annually. But clean energy is about to double it. And so the question in my mind always is, while this is the most innovative moment in human history, what's happening with how fast we are moving to decarbonize our economy, I really do believe that. The question always is it going fast enough relative to the challenge that our civilization faces? And then you can look at that across all of the SDG goals and ask yourself the same question. And the answers can be uncomfortable, right? Because that's really the big concern. It's like, I do believe we are moving the needle on many of these important challenges. It's just hard to know, is it going fast enough to make a difference in the time that we need it to?
You mentioned about the America's biggest home builder, say D.R. Horton. Tell us about how you were able to win over, and a lot of startup leaders or enthusiasts listening are perhaps keen to have big contracts. Perhaps you can tease out a little bit about what it took to win over such a bigger player or the biggest player in the market.
So, of course, I'll start by saying we got lucky, but I do think there's also a playbook or maybe some insights that could be useful for people who are listening that want it as well. We got lucky because you always get lucky if you land a big giant corporate partner early on. I mean, it might not end up being very good for your company, but it feels like luck, right? So in 2021, we raised a $2 million seed round for the business. The market was pretty frothy at that time. I mean, interest rates were still low. A lot of money was flowing into early stage venture capital. So I think the timing for our business was right. Of course, that's luck, but we still executed very well through that round. We still raised the money. In early 2022, an investor who hadn't invested in us, but who was following us, offered to make an introduction to D.R. Horton, or maybe he had said something and D.R. Horton wanted to talk to us. Okay, so the door opens. Now, the reason that we've been able to develop a relationship, and again, so this goes back, what, 2.5 years, coming up on 3 years that we've known the folks at D.R. Horton. What was important early on was establishing credibility and trust. We were small, so we had to trust them that they had our best interests at heart. They're an investor in Planted as well. And they had to really trust us that we were going to be able to deliver. And so over now 2.5 years, we've built into this relationship milestones, things that we will do together, time that we will spend together. Their team has been with us in our fields understanding the grass, actually harvesting with us to even really understand the supply chain. We've built in milestones that may unlock more opportunities together, where we go build a roof together with our material on a D.R. Horton home. Everybody sees how it works on the house. Their crews get to see how it installs, and then that unlocks another milestone we start shooting for. So over time, the trust builds on both ends, and you get a partner who's willing to buy in with a startup because they've seen us execute and do what we say we're going to do over and over again. And so that is my advice to other founders. If the door opens and you have that type of opportunity, the instinct and desire, and of course the urge, is to get as much as you can upfront at once, right? For your company, as many resources, as much capital, but that may not be the best thing long term. The best thing long term might really be to say, look, let's form a partnership here. Let's go down a path together toward a shared vision and future. And the more we execute, let's put more on the table, to continue to do together as we scale up this partnership. That's worked for us. And I think that that's a very healthy way to do it, because if it stops working, there are off ramps without so much being invested that things are harder to unwind. And there's, I mean, it's not, the stakes are always high, but I think you can mitigate the downside risk and create more opportunity for long-term success together.
If you're enjoying this conversation with Josh, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and share this episode with a colleague or friend who needs to hear real stories of climate action that works. Let's build this movement together, one conversation at a time. So, what's your take on how Supercool identifies the climate solutions which are scalable and investable?
So Supercool is a different beast. Supercool we launched last year, and it came out of Planted, in the sense that my lens started to change. The stories that I was looking for, the innovation that I was looking for, became more business to business focused, just like Supercool is a business, Planted is a business to business type of product, right? We sell to home builders, we sell to other companies. And so with Supercool, what gets me very excited is when I see businesses whose solutions, it doesn't just have to be business, it can be cities as well. Like we had on Marvin Rees recently, the former mayor of Bristol, England. That was really interesting to talk about the public-private partnership. He'd put in place a £1 billion public-private partnership to drive decarbonization for the city of Bristol when there just weren't funds otherwise. So it's also really innovative. But that also speaks to what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for are real world examples of how this is already happening at scale, how climate solutions are already underway, driving value for companies, whether that's cutting costs, growing profits, driving values for citizens and consumers that actually enhances their quality of life or makes a city a more livable place to, spend time, while cutting carbon emissions as well. And so those are the kinds of stories that we tell. And we do see, I do see this as an interesting moment. I'd mentioned the global investment numbers in clean energy. I mean, it's extraordinary. You also have over a decade of climate tech startups that have raised significant capital into the growth stages, Series B, Series C, Series D, that you cannot get to if you don't have a solution already in market that you're selling to someone. Now, not all those companies have succeeded. Many have failed, but many exist, and their products are available, their services are available. And then you have thousands and thousands, 15,000 cities globally that are now operating clean climate action plans. And so some part of their city is a living laboratory for change. They're trying things and scaling what works to cut carbon, enhance quality of life, bring down costs for the city. I've seen it over and over again. Those are the stories we like to tell. I feel like we're talking about systemic change. It's like someone said to me recently, we were having a conversation. She said, well, yeah, I have switched to glass containers and I have switched all my stuff in my house. So I've gotten rid of my plastic. It's like, great. That's great. I'm really happy for you. What makes me really happy is when I hear about a solution like Loop, which is this reuse system that exists in France and Japan today, where consumer products on store shelves are already packaged in reusable versions of their otherwise disposable packaging. And I'm talking about like Coca-Cola bottles and your Avion and hundreds of products. When you purchase that product, you pay a little deposit at the grocery store. When you bring the packaging back, you get your deposit back. And there's a company called TerraCycle that then has all the infrastructure to make sure that that packaging gets sanitized, gets returned to the to the product companies, and the new product goes into the same packaging. So you don't even have to think about recycling as a consumer. It's the system is being put in place to make it easy for all of us, to make it the default behavior to do what works for the planet. And there's upsides for the companies as well. They can design better packaging. They actually see over time with the right incentives and regulations from the government, it actually costs less to design reusable packaging than just one-use throwaway packaging. You can change a lot. I get very excited about the system level view of how we're moving into the future. It's probably still the lazy environmentalist in me who doesn't want to work very hard. And I want to see systems that make it just the default easy for society to be doing quote unquote the right thing because the economics of it and the social values of it work for all of us.
Let's talk about convenience or inconvenience for the customer, removing all of those inconveniences based on the examples that you've shared. That's really good. What do you see as the next frontiers for the climate economy?
I think we're in it right now. It's what a friend of mine, this guy, Keith Zackheim, he runs a company called Antenna. It's a global marketing communications agency, what he calls the age of adoption. And I do think that's a useful phrase to think about where we are in 2025. Many climate solutions exist. We're beyond the pilots. We're beyond the wish casting. I hope this were the way, this is the way it could be. It's the way it is. These solutions are here. Companies are starting to adopt technologies. I'll give you just an example. There's a company called Brainbox. It's a startup just acquired by Train Technologies that can go into virtually any building, like a big office tower, and say, okay, on floor 11, we know with 96% certainty who's going to be occupying that floor 6 hours from now. So we can gradually either cool that space or gradually warm that space. We can see when more renewables are on the grid and use energy at that time, or we can see when energy costs less and then use energy at that time. But overall, our system is going to cut energy costs by 25% for that building, cut carbon. And now that solution's in over 15,000 buildings worldwide. And so that to me is the moment we're in where forward-looking decision makers are saying, I'd be an idiot not to adopt this solution. And the good news is if I go take it to my boss, he's not going to fire me. I might get a raise because I'm actually doing something useful for the company. We're not just cutting carbon, we're actually cutting our bottom line. We're doing a lot to make the business. We are in that moment of adoption. Now, it's not an even moment. I mean, there is that quote, the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed. That is the moment that we are in. You can find these incredible examples of really forward-looking action all over the world. It's not a Western world thing. It's not a North-South thing. It's not an East-West. It's everywhere. At Supercool, with our podcast and our newsletter, we're going out to try and identify that, kind of find the evidence, find the examples, and then shed a light on it. That's where I think we are. We're in this moment of adoption of really awesome solutions that cut carbon and improve our economy, improve our way of life.
With the energy example for the utilization, it's been way overdue. The common complaints you hear from employees in offices is it's too hot or it's too cold. And different demographics may say it's too hot. My basic understanding on that is the HVAC, the heating, ventilation, air conditioning industry. A lot of the offices just dump the heat in during the winter, let's say 3 times a day, without any understanding of the weather patterns, any recording of the weather patterns. So the previous explanation you gave is way overdue in the UK. I've spoken to a number of companies who are using the big word AI to record live the outside temperature and also if I compound it with the COVID, there's less people in the office and so less utilization of the offices. So now more than ever, it's critical to understand who is in those offices and how many people are using it. So yeah, I thought I would expand on that. The time is now to reap those opportunities. So what other sustainability innovations do you see coming in the next 5 years? It could be the AI or any other key technologies as we draw our conversation to a close.
One of the things that excites me a lot is not necessarily new technology, but when you look at existing climate technologies that now have achieved scale, solar, for example, when you look at the cost curve of solar over the last certainly 5 decades, going back to 1975, the costs have come down consistently by 99. Like that's remarkable, right? And so it follows that learning curve where when manufacturing capacity doubles, cost drops by some predictable percentage. And this has played out now for 5 decades. Okay, that's great. And if you look in many places around the world, solar is already the cheapest form of electricity. You look at more places around the world today with the costs of batteries dropping 40% just last year. Now, solar plus batteries means 24/7 solar is viable in more parts of the world and it's only going to increase. Okay, that's all wonderful. But if I look out 10 years and I think, what's really the thing that might change everything? If you project that solar curve out another decade, you get to energy costs that are so low it almost changes everything. You get almost to trivially cheap energy to a point where now you can start thinking about massive desalinization of water in the sea. Like suddenly so much becomes so much more affordable than it's ever been. And it's like, it's a crazy thought experiment because the sci-fi future might actually be a decade away if you just follow the evidence that's been happening for the last 5 decades. Right? The thing that would be weird is if you don't get there in a decade. If for some reason the curve decides to break after 5 decades and it's never broken before, right? So, but you can't find anyone to model it because anyone who tries to model that and publish just sounds like a mad person. They sound nuts. But I think that's something to watch.
Impressive because if you look at the alternative to solar, the price, the curve is the other way around where it keeps going up. And also you have other innovations like geothermal. What is your final thought, Josh, to the listeners, whether it is the climate enthusiast individual or a sustainability startup leader or a business leader or even a policy leader? What final thoughts do you want to leave to the listeners, please?
I think the final thought that I would leave, and this is my observation of what I see now over the last year working on Supercool. So talking to all sorts of executives and founders and CEOs and policymakers is that what strikes me is in our culture, there is the view that it will be the young generations that save us. Right? Like that's, oh yeah, okay, the young people. We got to educate the young people because they're the ones who are going to figure it out. I think that's completely false. What I see, since we are living in the moment of the greatest urgency right now, what I see is the companies that are the most consequential on the planet today in terms of solving climate, almost to a T, every one of the founders, CEOs leading those companies is probably over 50 years old. Like there's no question. I mean, I think Elon Musk is right around my age. We both went to Penn around the same time. You know, I'm 50, what, 3? He's right around my age. If you look in, I won't remember his last name, but in the UK at Octopus Energy, right? Greg, is it Robertson? I can't think of his last name. He's not a spring chicken, and that's one of the most impressive companies on the planet. You just look across the board. You look at a company like we had on my show called Rondo Energy. They've designed batteries for industry, but they're heat batteries. They're not lithium ion batteries. They're heat batteries. You know, they've got bricks inside, and you heat the bricks, and the bricks store the heat, and then that can come out as steam. It can come out right at whatever temperature you need it, at whatever pressure, et cetera, et cetera. That might actually be a massive opportunity to deindustrialize or decarbonize industry. I had the founder of that company on my show. That guy's probably pushing 75. I mean, I hope. Seemed like it. He'd been around for a really, really long time. Let's just say an elder guy, right? But he said to me, he's like, look, Josh, he's like, I failed for about 25 years trying to design solar thermal energy systems at an industry scale to be able to get them project financed. I have all the battle scars. I know everything that went wrong. And that's like how I know how to do it right. If you're gonna, so who do you want to back? Do you want to back the genius coming out of MIT who has a clean heat battery but has no idea about the project finance and how to get something all the way, or do you want to back the old man who's like, I'm still in the game, I know how to do this. Now you could say, well, let's put them together and you'll get a far better team. I agree with that too. I think really the point that I'm trying to make is everybody's in the game, right? Everybody belongs in the game. Everybody's expertise is demanded because this is the moment right now. It's not about what happens 25 years from now. It's about right now, and everybody has an opportunity and everybody belongs. And whether you failed or succeeded, just bring it, because we need everybody's best efforts. And that's what gets me excited. That's why I'm hopeful for this moment, because people aren't hanging it up. They're bringing everything to the table to try and help our civilization overcome the biggest challenge we've ever confronted.
We need these leaders you mentioned. No doubt there are more. Get young people, them to be mentored, coached, learn as much ideas. As you mentioned, experience from doing is far different from experience from inspiration as well. So let's bring that inspiration and the experience, and hopefully we can create a magic. Thank you so much, Josh. If listeners want to find more about your work, where can they find you, Josh?
The best place to find everything we're working on at Supercool is getsuper.cool. That's our weekly podcast. Our newsletter goes deeper into subjects we're covering on next-gen climate innovations. Our YouTube channel is also growing really nicely, which is very exciting to see. Similarly, it's super cool. On social, I tend to be most active on LinkedIn. So if your listeners want to find me, that's a pretty good place to connect. We're starting to build Blue Sky. I don't fits and starts. We'll see how far we get. We're on Instagram as well, but really LinkedIn for anyone who wants to reach out and connect with me, and that would be great.
Listeners and viewers can look in the description and should be able to find it. So thank you so much, Josh. So to the listeners, thank you for joining us. Remember, stay bold, stay practical as always, and keep transforming.